you would be spreading hate and division and lack of community cohesion, and that was under Justin Trudeau. I would certainly halt immigration from any society that does not share our values.
Gad Saad was on the Rubin Report talking about Islam. He's a fascinating individual. Let's listen to what he has to say and then talk about it after.
What do you see as the future for Canada? You know, America seems to be turning around right now.
Yeah.
We seem like we got to the precipice, we looked into the abyss, and we're coming back. I don't see that moment for you guys just yet.
You're exactly right. You really needed a cataclysmic figure like Donald Trump to be able to turn things around. Now, anybody who comes in is going to be better than Justin Trudeau. So there is going to be an improvement of sorts, but it certainly will not be anything like what Donald Trump has been able to now, invigorate and so on. So I'm cautiously optimistic that things will improve, but unfortunately the demographic realities in Canada in general and in Quebec and Montreal in particular are so astounding that I don't see how. I mean, it'll just be a slow walk into the abyss of infinite lunacy, really.
That's got to be tough to sit with as a Canadian. I mean, you lived through this once already.
Exactly.
I mean, Lebanon was a Christian country.
Within our lifetime, right? Lebanon was about 65% Christian, and now it's flipped the other way around. It's about 65% Muslim, and it didn't take 500 years. It took, 40, 50 years. And so things can quickly change. And usually you can predict. There's a book by a gentleman by the name of, he's a missionary from Africa. His name is Peter Hammond. He wrote a book a few years ago where he looked at what happens to a society as a function of the percentage of people who are of the Islamic faith. 0 to 2%, or they're just a exotic minority, 3 to 5%. They're a bit more politically, motivated, but they're still pretty quiet. And you could predict it as easily as the trajectory of diabetes, right? With more Islam comes more problems. And at one point you close your eyes, you open them, and then the whole society is Islamic.
What would you do if you were Prime Minister of Canada?
So certainly no one can stay in Canada who does not share the foundational deontological principles of Canada, right? So there can't be a two-tier system where we can criticize vigorously any religion except one, because that would be Islamophobic. There is a motion that was passed at the table called M103 that, can make it very difficult to criticize Islam because you would be spreading hate and division and lack of community cohesion, and that was under Justin Trudeau. So I would certainly halt immigration from any society that does not share our values. Look, I'll give you an analogy from evolutionary psychology. When you're choosing a mate, one of the best ways to ensure that you're going to have a successful marriage is what's called assortative mating, meaning birds of a feather flock together. If I share the same values as my mate, I'm much more likely to have, it's not difficult to understand, right? Well, you could apply that exact same mechanism. I call it cultural homophily, cultural liking of similar others, right? So you're much more likely to integrate people from Denmark or Sweden or Estonia, not because they may share your skin hue or not, but because they're likely to share some of those foundational values that the West was built on. Regrettably, many other societies don't. And so I would certainly reduce that greatly, and I would very vigorously deport anyone who adheres to those kinds of antithetical principles.
Do you think the average Canadian is just kind of sitting around like, Trump save us at this point? I mean, Trudeau showed up to Mar-a-Lago just a couple days ago and basically kissed the ring, and now it sounds like even he's going to do something as it pertains to the border and everything else.
I hate to say this because I like to always be smiling and optimistic, but I also like to be truthful.
Yeah.
I'm not very optimistic for the following reason. So I can walk in my neighborhood in Montreal, which is, there are a lot of Jews. There are a lot of people who support my message, who come up to me, who are fans. Dear Dr. Saad, I love you for reasons X, Y, Z. The next question I ask him, do you mind if I ask who you vote for? Oh, I voted for the Liberal Party. So that disconnect, I love you, Dr. Saad, but I voted for the Liberal Party, and I will continue to do so for the next 17 generations, and there will never be any autocorrection in my political voting behavior. How could you resolve the problem if I can never get you to change your behavior?
So do you see any way, I mean, not just with Canada, but with, say, Germany and France and Denmark and some of these other countries going through this, do you see any solution that ultimately is not violent to this? Because it seems to me that the people who either have suicidal empathy or ostrich parasitic syndrome, that it's almost too late. It might have not been too late 10 years ago to have dealt with this appropriately, but now, as you mentioned, it's a numbers game that I don't see a real way to get out of.
I don't either. And when you and I have known each other now for probably about a decade,
Yeah.
and certainly a decade before that, if not more, I'd been saying that if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to have a repeat of the Beirut that I escaped. And people would say, that's such an exaggeration. That's so hyperbolic. That's so silly. I understand you had, this childhood trauma. Don't project it onto the West. It'll never happen. Well, you have to have the imagination to be able to extrapolate these patterns, right? It won't happen next year. It won't happen in 10 years, but give it enough time and it has to happen. There's no right? So we won't amputate your legs the first day you get diabetes, but let it rage far enough and it will lead to the amputation of your limbs. That's what's going to happen.
So what do you make about what happened here in America? Because again, I think we really looked at the abyss and decided not to do it. I think that's really what this election was.
So I'm very optimistic that, of course, I'm elated that Trump won. But right away, I started warning people, don't be complacent, because that could just be a little bleep.
Mm-hmm.
But then the wokester come back even stronger than ever before. So it took about 50 to 100 years for many of these cultural values to lead us to where we were. Hopefully, it won't take 50 to 100 years to reverse them, but it won't begin and end with Trump.
I want to point something out that I find really interesting, and that's Poland, because Poland has completely changed the structure of their immigration policy. And since this restructure, I believe in 2015, 2016, don't quote me on that, but I believe that's when they started to restructure this, they haven't had any radical terrorist attacks when it comes to bus bombings from radical Muslims since the change of this policy. And I don't see a lot of people across the world going on podcasts, going on social media, writing things publicly about how they think that people in Poland are Islamophobic. It's so interesting to me because a lot of the civilian population, the Gen Pop in Poland, agree with the government's policy of their immigration rules, and it has had a complete impact. And it has had an incredible impact on how people there feel when it comes to safety. And unfortunately, we have more and more people now in the United States and in Canada who feel less safe with these immigration policies. I'm not saying that we should not let immigrants into countries. What I am saying is that we should look at trends throughout history of where things are going wrong when it comes to violence and attacks against people who are citizens. If you look at Lebanon, for example, which at one point had a much higher population of Christians, and you look at their Christian population today, and you even look at what Hezbollah does to a lot of those Christians, or Syria, where they go around and they're killing ethnic minorities, including Christians too. Look at the difference in the increase between 1970, 1980, even a little bit before, and 2025, of the Muslim population and the radical groups that have come out of those populations. You know, a lot of people who are anti-Israel always like to talk about the Lehi and these radical groups that were just there to slaughter Palestinians and slaughter Arabs. Where are those groups today? Do the Lehi exist in New York? Do the Lehi exist in Poland? Do the Lehi exist in Jordan? Do the Lehi exist in Israel? No, you have the IDF. These groups, these radical groups had been established to help defend the Jewish people. Were there atrocities committed? Of course there were. Of course there were. Were there atrocities committed before the 1900s, before the 1800s, during the Ottoman Empire, during the Romans, during the Greeks? Were there? Yeah, of course there were. That's what conquest looks like. But Islam and radical Islam is looking for an Islamic caliphate. That is what their mission is. In fact, we are living in the midst of what that mission is. The truth is that not everyone who's a Muslim, not everyone who believes in Islam is looking to annihilate all of the people in Arabia and all of Israel and all of the Jews. But there are radicals. There really are radicals. And on the Israel side, there are radicals who don't believe in Palestinians, who don't believe in Islam. And I don't agree with those radicals either. I'm going to put it out there. I say it all the time. I think that extremism on the pro-Israel side is not okay. It doesn't help the conversation. We need to be hearing more from the moderates. We need to be hearing more from people who are living the day to day, who just want peace, who just want to be able to come to the roundtable discussion and have an opportunity to put our differences all out on the table together and figure out a way to do this together. Especially for those in the Middle East, because at the end of the day, my friends, we're all cousins. Thank you so much for all your support. I'll see you next time. If you want to continue the conversation, you can support my work for free. Discord does not cost a thing. It is the best way to connect with me and others who are seeking the truth. The link is in the description. But if you want to take it one step further, my Patreon gives you access to the Israel you don't see, uncovering the untold stories of what mainstream media does not show you. The link is in the description, and it helps me to continue this work. Or if you're just looking to help this thing go, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee is a really easy way to support me. This channel, this work does not happen without all of you. Thank you. I love you. I'll see you next time.